All right, I'm just admitting people as we come along. Okay, so today we're talking about heat treatments, and I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to the course of today's discussion. We'll obviously focus on the purpose of heat treatments, why we look at them, and the areas that heat treatments are undertaken, and there are 3 primary functions. Also, in relation to that, we'll talk about bed bugs. I'm only going to talk about the basics because in amongst our crowd today, people with far greater detail on bed bugs than myself. I've been working in pest management for 30 years, but you know, bed bugs is just an occasional pest for me to treat through heat treatments, whereas some of you are treating bed bugs on a daily or weekly basis. We're going to look at the power options that you're going to need for setting up a heat treatment system, your different options when it comes to heaters, your site preparation, your initial assessment, and then setting up your equipment for your project or for your treatment, the eradication process itself, and then the finish up and the packing up of your equipment. All right, so room heat treatments, there's 3 primary functions of heat treatments, or 5 market sectors that you look at. First of all, our main part of presentation today is bed bugs for use in the Australian hotel industry or at domestic situations for the control of bed bugs. And we'll look at that as a main part of our business, our discussion. There are 2 other functions that we'll look at in more detail on another day. One is the use of heat treatments for port services. Again, the heating of shipping containers for AQIS and heat fumigation. And the third option is for using heat treatments for food production facilities and larger areas where there are a need to move away from insecticide use. So when we're looking at heat treatments for hotel use or for home, the advantages that we're going to look at here is that we're using a non-chemical treatment. And I guess when we look at sustainability, the environment, or just a modern outlook by both the public or our domestic clients or commercial clients, there's always going to be an interest in a non-chemical solution in almost all cases of pest management. There's a preference from the marketplace, but there's also a preference from the end user. When we're looking at the use of heat treatments, we're also looking at a no odor or no moisture associated with chemical use. So there's no issues with entering the room after a treatment. And in most cases, the hotel room is being handed back to the owner of the building at the end of the treatment. After a cooling down process, the main advantages of using heat treatments in the hotel industry is that the room is returned for use the same day. And that's a major bonus in comparison to chemical treatments when we're looking at either a 7 or a 14-day treatment program, or we're obviously looking at a 21-day handing back if we're following the bed bug code of practice. All right. Now, from a business owner's perspective, when it comes to a commercial pest control business, which is everyone that's joining us here today, I guess looking at a no toxicity or no contamination of the room being a major bonus. Also the same when it comes to treating carpets or bedding. There's no contamination of the bedding when we're using heat treatments. Professional pest managers are also looking at a way of differentiating their business from their competition. So there's definitely a market exclusive or a way of setting your business apart from your competition using heat treatments. There are only a very small number of companies in Australia using heat treatments as their primary function when it comes to bed bug control. And of course, after you've done a treatment, you'll notice that the room has a real fresh and clean fragrance. That could be a combination of the volatilizing of all the plastic and synthetic surfaces in there, but you actually get a change to the odor of the room, be it all the humidity is removed, the smell associated with bed bugs is also removed, and yeah, that heated room actually has a nice fresher smell. All right, bed bug basics. As I mentioned, I'm only going to just touch on this briefly because there's a lot of experts in our discussion here, and bed bugs are just an interesting and difficult insect to control. So looking at our bed bugs, I'll pop this up here. Here's a photo of bed bugs inside the box spring in the bottom right-hand corner. essentially bed bugs are the hitchhiker of the world. And so when we're in Australia's pre-COVID and hopefully eventually our post-COVID marketplace, we'll see a significant return to bed bugs in the hotel industry and for homes and for the fly-in, fly-out miners. At the moment, there's such minimal movement throughout Australia. You're seeing far less bed bugs hitchhiking around, be it from five-star hotels or the backpacking hotel community. You're seeing far less bed bugs at the moment, but that would be traveling around in the luggage, clothing, and backpacks of the traveling public. Bed bugs, the female bed bugs will lay up to 500 eggs in her lifetime. And the interesting thing about the current process, as hotels are just now reopening, bed bugs can survive for several months, and it's actually been suggested up to 24 months without the need of a blood meal. And so it's the movement in a facility or the release of CO2 as rooms are reopened, or obviously the heat of the human body in a bed will actually activate and stimulate bed bugs as more and more hotel rooms are being opened. And so the interesting thing about many pests, but particularly bed bugs, they will die, both eggs, larvae and adults will die at 49 degrees held for a sustained period of time. All right. Oh, interesting. And it's interesting, bed bugs particularly are an interesting shape. And one of the things I like to see on, say, the Australian Pest Managers Network is people just putting up photographs of different pests. Can I have an ID, please? And the interesting thing about bed bugs, they hold a very unique shape in comparison to the other insects that we're all working on controlling. All right, so bed bugs the instar stage of bed bugs are so small that they can move in through the stitching of mattresses. Sorry if I do get distracted here. I'm just constantly bringing new people into this discussion. Bed bugs will obviously ingest a large proportion of their weight, in fact, several times their own body weight in blood, and you'll see adults expanding and changing color throughout their life. And it's interesting about the way bed bugs move around the world, but of course it makes no difference between 1-star, 5-star, no star or backpacking communities. It was interesting, I was speaking to a national manager of one of the big hotel chains, and he says, oh, they don't have a 5-star hotel, they don't have any bed bug issues. And that was quite interesting having that discussion with them, because of course we know full well that bed bugs will inhabit any hotel situation. So the interesting thing about discussing with both the pest community, with the hotel community, there is obviously a great interest in utilizing heat as an alternative to chemicals. And so chemicals will have obviously positives, be it perhaps an inexpensive or a quick treatment process. But of course, the use of heat treatments will also have some significant benefits. All right, so just looking at some of those benefits, I might just move through this quickly, and I'll just touch on a couple of things that I think are important. The interesting thing about a survey that was held internationally, and I'm going to talk about this in the next slide, but what's interesting about this discussion here is that the use of chemicals, when a large survey was done of pest management professionals, it was determined that it takes about 2.6 visits to a site to completely control bed bugs on average. So some are controlled with one treatment and some are controlled with multiple treatments, but the absolute median of a large proportion of the projects or the treatments that were done was 2.6 visits. And we can see this here, and I'll show you this in a moment. And the median for heat treatments was 1.3. And that's an important thing to note, because you do not get every bed bug, egg, larvae, or adult killed every time with heat treatments, because it's a real interesting process in order to make sure you remove any cold spots. And obviously the penetration of heat can only do so much in a lot of cases, but it's certainly far more efficient than using chemicals on an international basis. Okay, there's a whole range of different things that would be of benefit. I think when it comes to heat treatments, the most important benefit is the rooms are only out of service for a short period of time and can be handed back to the hotel, in most cases with a successful treatment at the end of this, at the end of the same day. All right, so just looking at this chemical comparison, chemical and heat treatment comparison that was done internationally. And so here you can see a graph, a column graph here of 1, 2, 3, and 4 visits on average it takes to control bed bugs using either chemicals at the upper end of this discussion, or lower is the heat treatments. And so only 13% of treatments were controlled on the first treatment with chemicals, as opposed to 66%. That's quite an interesting process. So once we got to the median, which was 2.6 treatments, as opposed to 1.3 treatments using a chemical treatment. So two of the most important elements to a heat treatment, I believe, is returning back to the hotel generally within the same day. And the second element is just the likelihood of success is a lot greater using heat treatments as opposed to chemicals. All right, now just looking at your commercial heaters, I'm looking at this in a broader sense, and I'll show you some particular examples, and I've got some behind here, which I'll show you during the discussion. Okay, so your commercial heaters will generally be made of a metal construction, very durable, very tough units, because they're going to be used on a daily basis. They've generally got a lifespan when used on a daily basis of about 5 years. They've got an inbuilt fan system, which will run fan over a blade or a coil heater to actually run a large amount of air over that heated surface in order to get a large amount of air out into the room that you're working in. Okay, so these systems are designed to gradually increase the room temperature, and so often you might use them in conjunction with the in-house heating or the in-house air conditioning prior to arriving on site, and essentially these ones will gradually raise that temperature anywhere up to 55, 65, or even 70 degrees. Power sources will, in the different variations I'm going to show you, will use either a combination of 240 volt power or 3-phase power, and we'll look at that. All of the units that we're looking at right here today they all have a weight of around about 16 to 18 kilograms, but all of them are generally 20 kilograms of less. Some of the new technology that we've seen in the last few years with heat treatment or commercial heaters is moving away from the big heavy trolleys. Some of those units were about 35 kilos in weight. These units here are around, well, all under 20 kilos. So I'm going to show you 3 different systems that we're involved in here at PestIT. And the first one is an American-made system called Trifold. These are 240 volt heaters. And the thing I like about these heaters is that you've got, an extreme positive and a negative. And so the positive, of course, is that it's, apart from being portable, you can utilize the 240 volt power available either in a domestic situation, apartments, or in a hotel room. And so you have to work through a process of accessing suitable amperage, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but nice and portable, but also convenient using 240 volt. The only downside of using 240 volts is that it will take longer to heat the room in a lot of cases. In a typical hotel room setup, you'll have about 9 kilowatts of power at your disposal. When you move into 3-phase power, you'll probably have about 18 kilowatts, I should say, of power at your disposal. Okay, so just looking at these Trifold heaters. So the brand here is the Eradiflow. These are a 1800 watt heater. This particular one has a single 7 amp or 7.5 amp input from your typical 10 amp power source. So 240 volt, plug it into just about any power point in Australia and you're ready to go. Now, looking at the slightly larger brother of that, which would also be incorporated into the heat treatment kit that you would look at with a 240 volt option, you'd have 2 kettle ports, and you can just see there's the front of the unit and the rear of the unit. At the fan, you'll see two typical, terminal ports or kettle ports, whatever you want to call them. Now, the idea of that is that both of those incorporate 10.4 amp input and therefore has a 21 amp consumption. So of course it requires 2 power points from 2 different circuits, and that's how you can actually incorporate the use of 5,000 watts or 5 kilowatts into the use of 240 volts. And so that's a really unique innovation, and you would use 3 heaters as part of a hotel room kit. So really useful dynamic systems, and that would be a great option to consider when you're using 240 volt. So from a Triflow perspective, you've got access to sensors, or you might just use something really simple. I'm not too sure you can see me in the corner here, but just a nice handheld, little portable digital temperature thermometer. You'd also use a combination, potentially, particularly those of you who are into termites, you probably have a thermal imaging camera. That is one of the best ways to get into the room and see where your warm areas are, but also your cold spots. And then a fan. So just while I'm going to stop sharing this screen if I can, and I'm going to show you, actually I'll do that at the end, the different pieces of equipment that I have here behind me. All right, next we've got the Thermo Bug Range. Now this is a German-made range, and this really is what I believe is one of the gold standards when it comes to commercial heaters for bed bug control. So this is a 3-phase power unit. And so for 3-phase power, you obviously got to move away from the power that's available on site, but then you'll probably find that many of the hotels, particularly high-rise hotels, will have 3-phase power. Of course, you just got to ensure that you determine your access points, and of course they'll have either a 10 amp access point, 16 amp access point, or 20 amp access point. And of course our primary option would be to get a 32 amp access point for your 3-phase power. But if that's of interest, we can look at that with you at a later stage. The real advantage, apart from these are beautiful, high quality systems, the real advantage of using these large coil heaters that are 3-phase power, you have the fastest startup temperature times and the most streamlined treatment time. So you're going to get a room up to heat quite quickly. You really want to get your room to 55 degrees or more, and that's in every corner and every element of the box spring and the bed heads and so on. And you'll hold that there for about 4 hours, and then you'll have a 1-hour pack down. So 1 hour pack up, 4-hour treatment, and a 1-hour pack down. So with a 3-phase heater, well, that'll be the best way to do it. The downside, of course, is you've got to have access to 3-phase power on site or have a generator outside. And we'll look at generators and so on. From a thermobug perspective, you've got access to a whole range of temperature sensors and in the air blower. So down the bottom right hand of your screen there, you'll see a sort of a snorkel and a fan. And so that's a different style of fan. That's actually going to draw air downwards because as you heat up a room, your heat is going to be moved right to the top. Above your head, it might be 65 degrees, even 70 degrees. And that snorkel or that blower is sucking air down and redistributing it at ground level. So that's a great system as well. Okay, another high quality and really nice unit. And we've actually got some units here to show in relation to the BRC hot wave. So this again are a 3-phase operation, portable, that's 17 kilo unit. And again, being 3-phase and a large coil heater, it's going to have the fastest startup time and the most streamlined treatment time. And so being French made, just like the other German made units, you're going to find, great quality equipment. All right, I just want to show you a really quick video. Let's see if this works. And we'll go from there. My name's Peter McCann. I just thought I'd check in just to show you a demonstration we're running today in our office, in our warehouse. And behind me you can see our warehouse, and you probably can also see some heaters. In fact, today we're doing a heat treatment of our entire warehouse as a demonstration of using heat as an alternative form of pest control. And heat treatments, be it in container fumigation, in hotel rooms for bed bugs, or in food production, will be a viable form of control. So I'm just going to quickly show you through this process. I'm going to just take you off seeing my face. No, we can't. Anyway, so what we'll do is I'll just try and take you through what we're doing here. So this is essentially the PestIT warehouse. And then right here, essentially are our heaters. These are 9 kilowatt heaters, and they're strategically placed throughout our warehouse, as are a bunch of fans. So at the moment, we're just getting our facility up to a temperature. In fact, we started today around about 20 degrees. We've got a 100 kilowatt generator out the front. And so if you're interested during the course of the day, we can show you how things develop. And so essentially, it's our little place here at PestIT. And yeah, already it's getting quite warm, and we'll keep you posted. Okay, cheers. All right, so that was just showing you a heat treatment that we did in our warehouse. In fact, I'm in the warehouse at the moment, and it's nowhere near 20 degrees, I can tell you that. Okay, so looking at site preparation, one of the critical things, once we've moved past looking at the different different treatment options that you would have in terms of, different heater options, we'd have to make a decision whether we're going to go with 240 volt heaters or 3-phase power. Then we'd have to look at our various sites. And so we'd have to look at your site preparation in terms of items to remove and things to do prior to your treatment. So let's look at available power. So when it comes to your heat treatment, all right, when you're looking at heat treatment, yeah, we're going to obviously decide whether we're using 240 volt power or 3-phase power. So when I'm looking at 240 volt power, I've got to look at the circuits that are going into the house or into the hotel room, and that will allow me to work out how many different circuits are available, and that will determine whether I can use 2, 3 or 4 heaters. Now with the 240 volt heaters, some of those units require 2 inputs, and that would be from 2 different circuits. And then so if I had 3 heaters in a particular room, I'm going to need 5 circuits. And so that might require me to run an extension cord into adjoining rooms to ensure that I've got enough power available. All right, then when I'm looking at a 3-phase system, such as the Thermo Bugs or the BRC Hot Wave, I'm going to need 3-phase power. So that 3-phase power could come from on-site. And so if I'm in a warehouse like the PestIT warehouse, I've got 3-phase power in the form of 10 amp or 20 amp or 32 amp, because we actually repair the systems and maintain units here. And in addition to that, if a hotel has a commercial kitchen or a loading dock or a lift, chances are they've got 3-phase power. It'll only be domestic situations, of course, and in most cases, motor inns and hostels, which are all on one level generally, obviously not going to have 3-phase power. And therefore, it's hiring of a generator. And so again, you just have to work out the the power consumption required. When we talk about power consumption, and we look at that with people that are buying the heaters, we actually have some calculations on how to determine how many heaters are required and what kVA output is required from your generator, but not critical for today. I just know that we would look at that at a later stage if this was of interest. All right, so what do we do when we're getting our rooms ready? Well, there are things that have to be removed or switched off. Okay, first of all, looking at the lower part of our screen, we've got hangers and we've got clothing. And one of the things that causes issues with a heat treatment is clutter. And you'll see some clutter in some photos coming up shortly. But looking at that, the idea is if I've got some air space in between the garments, then I'm going to have enough air circulation with the heaters and the fans to give me enough heat movement throughout that room. Okay, but what I would also do is unplug all electricals. I'd remove the batteries from smoke detectors. I'd also look at sprinklers, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the main thing is we look at anything that's going to be impacted by any temperature above 55 degrees. And when we're looking at above our head, it's going to be about 60, possibly even up to 70 degrees. And they're the sort of temperatures that we need to be quite careful of. Okay, then we'll also look at, apart from clothing, we look at drawers. And so if we have drawers of clothing, all of that has to be removed into the room and sometimes can be scattered and then rotated throughout your treatment, because everything has to have exposure to that sort of temperature for this to be successful. And of course, bedding, I'll show you a couple of examples and some videos coming up of what we do with bedding. But the idea is that the bed, the box spring and the bed heads and the mattress itself all need to be separated and sometimes just tilted up against the wall itself in order to allow air and heat to circulate around. One of the critical things, and I guess I look at this as what could really go wrong in a facility, is the issues associated with sprinklers. Sprinklers will damage your client's facility, it'll damage your heating equipment, and also probably have the fire brigade there. So all of those three will add cost to your project. And the first thing I'd be looking at in any hotel room will be sprinklers. Do I cover them? Do I have them isolated? What do I do? And so they're the sort of things that you would talk to your client about. There are simple covers that would be like on the right-hand side here, we've got a thing called the fire sprinkler cover that would have ice on the inside and magnets and would actually just attach to the sprinkler itself. And there are other mechanisms to cover those as well in order to make sure that the sprinklers are either disabled or kept at a suitable temperature. When we look at our room layout, we'll come to what we do about the room as we go along. Now, items that need to be removed. Now, I think a lot of this is really self-explanatory, and I'm just going to cycle through these during the discussion, but obviously candles would be one, and aerosols will obviously be one of the many other things, but anything that potentially can be damaged are really important. Now, these days, while we say plasma TVs, now we've moved on to LED TVs. LED TVs just generally need to be placed on the ground. And what will happen with TVs, particularly say the screen that I'm looking at in front of myself at the moment, the screen itself has a plastic base, and that will actually sort of just soften the base and then eventually just come over and lose its balance and fall off, whatever it might be. But as long as I would put all the TVs on the ground. Munitions and guns, well, I guess this is removed from an American presentation, because there'll always be munitions and guns in the States somewhere in a house. Plants, of course, fish and pets, musical instruments. I'd like my guitars out of the room, that's for sure. Records and tapes. So, I mean, a lot of it's self-explanatory, but anything that you think that's going to be damaged by 60 degrees and above needs to be removed. Everything else, we want to stay in there. So obviously anything that gets removed needs to be treated or disposed of. So if it's something that's coming back into the room, you would have to treat it in some way, be it even just cleaning or inspecting and then isolating before coming back into the room. Okay, so I'm going to do an initial assessment of my room before I start bringing everything in. So I've removed what needs to come out. I'll do an assessment. I'm going to work out where all my heat losses are. Heat loss will be out the windows. And so here's an example of a thermal image of a house being heated. And there we can see all the escaping points. So from the chimney to the roof, to the eaves, to the shutters, the doors, that's where all of my heat loss is going to go. So as I lose heat, that's going to take longer for my treatment process to take place. And also it's going to take longer for my room temperature to get to where I need it to get to. So managing heat loss. Well, these are really simple stuff, but closing windows and blinds, curtains, towels under door seams, and keeping the doors closed. Because the interesting thing is, every time I go into a room to check the temperature, I'm going to drop the room temperature by 5 degrees each time, roughly, sometimes 10. So it's really important to manage your time and removing everything from the room as you're heating up the room. And then you'll be sealing off and managing all these heat loss areas. Air vents and curtains. Now, you'll see in a moment what we did in a recent treatment process when commissioning some new equipment. But the idea is that the construction itself will start to absorb your heat. And so when I look at the construction, I'm looking at things like masonry or brickwork. That's going to absorb and take longer to bring that room up to temperature. It's also going to hold the temperature longer, and that will also be an impact on when I am cooling down the room at the end of the treatment. All right, so determining the level of infestation will actually determine how much effort goes into getting this room ready, the length of the treatment process. In a lot of cases, we've got a 4-hour treatment process once we've got the room to temperature. And these are all things that we need to be aware of. And so the level of infestation probably doesn't come from the interview with the client over the phone. It comes from the inspection as you're getting ready for the treatment itself. So thinking about, obviously, from highest to lowest, our level of treatment. So we're going to look at where are the bed bugs and how can I make sure that those areas are most exposed to heat. So this will all form, I don't know if it's easy for you to see on the screen at the moment, but this will all form part of the notes that we send. I'm going to look at my inspection process, which you all know where we're going to be looking at for bed bugs. So obviously we're going to get to the bed itself in a moment, but looking at the furniture around the room, I'm looking at obviously the kickboards, I'm looking at for the things like PowerPoints and all of the areas which I want to actually remove from its location, separate all the pillows and get those areas exposed to heat. Then when I look at the bed itself, again, looking at from highest to lowest, I'm looking at the bed itself. I want to be separating everything because it's important that I have the bed head away from the wall, the bed itself leaning up against the wall, separated from the mattress, and all these things out and exposed. All right. Now, where am I going to place my equipment? Of course, I've got everything centered on back towards the bed itself being one of our primary areas, but also this room, I would want everything separated so I can actually gain access to good air circulation. Now, our triangles there are examples of different heaters. So I look at this, this is quite a small room. It's only 12 square meters. So we call that a single, a single room as opposed to a double. I'll show you in a moment. So I look at, I've got 1.8 kilowatt heaters. And so this is only a small outlook here. And then I have some fans circulating that heat. If I was to go to a larger room, say, I would generally looking at this room here being 6 5 to 30 square meters. Hotel rooms also being a little bit larger in a lot of cases. I'm going to need about 9 kilowatts, or if I'm using 3-phase power, I have 2 heaters in there, and that would be 18 kilowatts. But here in this case, I've got an 1800 watt heater, an 1800 watt and a 5000 watt heater. Collectively, that's about 9 kilowatts of power usage or power output. And I've got 3 fans here strategically placed just to move the air around that. And so the idea is I would set up my room, and as I am setting things up, I have the heaters actually operating. Once I've got to the stage where I seal off the room, obviously the temperature will rise, and then I will leave all the fans off till the room's got to around about 40 degrees. Once the room's gone to 40 degrees, above my head, it's going to be quite a lot higher. And so I'm going to spiral or circulate that air downwards to ensure that I get the right temperature of being 50, 55 degrees, both at head height and at ankle height. And that's going to be the positive outlook I'm looking for. All right, so the eradication process itself. What we're going to do is I'm going to touch on just a couple of elements of the eradication process. I'm going to go through this quite quickly. So essentially we're treating the most infested part of, say, of a house first to ensure that we're going to reduce the amount of transfer of bed bugs from room to room. And that'd be the same process if I was looking at a hotel room as well. So we're going to place the heaters in the room, set the thermostat to 32 degrees, but essentially you would be coming into the room and checking between 32 and 40 degrees. And at that point, I would then, once I've got to that heat, then I would turn on my airflow processes, which is in this case fans. And I'm going to show you some of the equipment shortly. And then I would actually monitor that room for a period of time. Once I've reached my temperature of about 50 degrees, I'd like to hold that room for around about between up to 4 hours. But if I can hold it for 2 to 4 hours, then I'm going to have a lethal treatment process in place, as long as there's no cold spots and so on. And then you would actually do some work within the room to ensure that you've removed all the cold spots. So then you could start, you know, your timer, be it 2 to 4 hours, depending on the severity of the treatment process. So using simple devices, could be a thermal imaging camera or a little digital thermometer, or we've got some more sophisticated thermocouple systems that you can actually use to monitor and also to do some reporting processes. And so you can do that from outside of the room. All right, again, wordy here, not so important, but the idea of the whole treatment process will take you between 6 and 8 hours, depending on the power consumption, the severity of your process, and the time it's taken you to set up the room, run your process, and cool down the room. And so I would actually just look at that process in some of our videos in a moment to give you an understanding of what things you need to do within that room itself. Now, the interesting thing is you often hear that a lot of insects are controlled by holding that temperature at 50 degrees for a sustained period. But what I would actually say is that there are a lot of mobile insects like cockroaches. Yes, they will be killed if they're held in a room for that 4-hour period. But what I've seen is that cockroaches are very mobile. They'll vacate themselves from the room and you won't get the full treatment process using heat when it comes to cockroaches. But when it comes to bed bugs, generally, if you've done your heat increase correctly and do the fan use and circulate your air at the right moments, then you'll get less likelihood of the mobility of the bed bugs being able to move away from the heat source. So managing that content, again, this is all going to form part of your notes. And I think a lot of this is really self-explanatory, is that sometimes when you're doing a domestic situation, it's the clutter that's contributed to the process in the first place. And so if they've been unlucky enough to have bed bugs come into the facility or into the home, it's generally the clutter that aids that process from taking place. And so during your treatment, when you're forced with clutter like this, that'll either has to be removed or rotated or moved around during the course of your treatment to ensure that you get reasonable mortality during your treatments. In fact, you need complete mortality. Oh, sorry. So I'll just show you a video just recently of a domestic room treatment. And so the interesting element of this particular one is that this was just a small double room, all done just with one 5,000 watt heater. And so it was just a simple process when it is a relatively small room. So this had a small double-sized bed.
There's a room heater.
Oh,
Light.
There's Josh.
Frame and mattress. 7.5 on the mattress. 55 on the frame. And 58. All since about 11 o'clock.
So yeah, so that's just a short treatment on a room that had bed bugs, and that was just done with one heater. Just going to look at is that right? All right, looking at a commercial project just recently, a hotel that received their heaters, and this was just Josh actually went out to this job as well, and it's what we call a commissioning of heaters. And so the idea is that there was a demonstration done. The first part of the demonstration done is probably the 1 hour mark of the treatment. Then Josh actually had to leave because he was driving past. But I'll just quickly do this and just explain during the process. So if we look at a typical motel room, so what you'd call a typical one level double room, this would be about a 40 square meter room. So they said this is on a border town, and so it was having issues because of the impacts of COVID, and this one was actually a bed bug issue in this particular facility. So you can just see here the 3 heaters in place. This is actually 1 hour into the treatment, so the room's not to temperature at this stage. But you can see here that Josh has put some foil on the windows, and that's going to be the primary area where you're going to get your heat loss in this particular instance. And so I've got, yes, 68, 70 degrees coming out of each of the heaters. This room's only sitting at around about 25 to 29 degrees at this stage. So the rest of that treatment went from this point for another 2 to 3 hours, because of course the masonry, or your, you can see there, just 26 degrees. So your brickwork is going to absorb a lot of heat for that first hour in getting the room set up. All right, so cleaning up your room. So at this stage, you've done your heat treatment. It's time to cool it down. Now you'll find that either you have material in there that just needs to be cleaned. And I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail here, because we can just put in notes. And there's a lot of words here that you probably can't see on the screen, to be honest. But generally it will incorporate the use of vacuuming. And so we have specific vacuum bug vacs and things to actually make sure that you're removing all the material that's there. So obviously you've got dead adults, eggs and larvae that need to be vacuumed, but also you've got a lot of rubbish and material that either is been in the room as part of your treatment for mortality of the bed bugs. And so you may want to dispose of that, and that could be clothing or bedding material and what have you. And so that can generally be removed as part of the process. Now,